The cafe was bustling, the afternoon sun filtering through the windows, but Michael Dunn was lost in his own world. Seated at a corner table, the 9-year-old flipped through an ancient, weathered book as if he understood every word. Dr. Michael Cooper, a renowned polyglot known for speaking over 50 languages, couldn't help but notice the boy. His eyes widened as Michael muttered something under his breath in a language Dr. Cooper couldn't place, something strange, almost forgotten, yet oddly familiar. Intrigued, Dr. Cooper approached, thinking it was just an odd coincidence. "Could you translate that?" he asked, his voice rich with curiosity, offering Michael a chance to show his talents. Unbeknownst to Dr. Cooper, Admiral Carter, a man of few words and many secrets, sat nearby, his eyes narrowing as Michael spoke. While the cafe hummed with everyday chatter, Butera wasn't listening to the coffee machine's hiss or the clinking of cups. He was focused solely on the boy. In his years of military service, he'd studied codes and languages. This one was something far more dangerous. As Michael continued, unaware of the looming presence behind him, Butera's mind raced. This wasn't just an academic curiosity. This was a weapon in the form of a lost language. And Michael Dunn, sitting there, was unlocking it, piece by piece. The seemingly innocent exchange between Dr. Cooper and Michael was only the beginning. What started as a casual interaction would soon propel Michael and everyone around him into a world of secrets, espionage, and danger. They were all about to learn the true power of what Michael could do. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Michael's small fingers gripped the aged pages of the book, his eyes scanning the text as if the words were an old friend he'd known his whole life. Dr. Cooper leaned in, watching the boy closely, mesmerized by the way Michael seemed to know exactly where to place his fingers, each line of text flowing effortlessly from his lips. The language was ancient, full of strange syllables and cadences that felt like they belonged to a different time, or perhaps a different world. As Michael's voice rose and fell with the rhythm of the passage, the atmosphere in the cafe seemed to shift, like an invisible weight pressing down on the air. Dr. Cooper, a man who had spent his career studying languages and deciphering codes, had never heard anything like it. The moment Michael finished, a quiet hush fell over the cafe. Dr. Cooper's breath caught in his chest. He had heard the words, but something more had happened. It wasn't just that Michael spoke an ancient dialect with perfect fluency. The very air in the room had changed. The temperature had dropped ever so slightly, and the normally comforting noise of the cafe seemed to have faded into the background, as though the world had momentarily paused. For a brief second, Dr. Cooper wondered if he had imagined it, but then he looked at Michael, whose eyes were wide with a mix of confusion and awe, as if he, too, sensed the gravity of what had just transpired. Dr. Cooper, his mind racing, couldn't help himself. "Do you know what you just said?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Michael shook his head, his dark eyes unsure. "No. It just felt like I had to say it," Michael murmured, his brow furrowed. The boy's innocence was both a blessing and a curse. Dr. Cooper's pulse quickened, and he leaned closer, his voice low but insistent. "Can you do it again?" Michael hesitated for a moment before nodding. His fingers once again hovered over the book, and as he began to speak the passage again, Dr. Cooper felt a strange tension coil in the pit of his stomach. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they seemed to wrap around him, pulling him into something larger than himself. The soft glow of the cafe lights flickered briefly, as though reacting to the words. Michael's voice grew more confident, as if the book and its words were becoming familiar to him, guiding him rather than the other way around. Dr. Cooper watched, both fascinated and increasingly apprehensive, realizing that what he had thought was a simple case of linguistic talent was far more complex. In the back corner of the cafe, Admiral Carter sat motionless, his eyes narrowed, focused entirely on Michael. Unlike Dr. Cooper, who was caught up in the academic wonder of the moment, Carter understood the true weight of what was happening. His hand, which had been resting casually on his coffee cup, tightened into a fist, his knuckles whitening. He had recognized the language the moment Michael spoke. It was a relic from a time long buried, a language linked to covert military operations during the Cold War, operations that had been erased from history for a reason. He had heard rumors about the language for years, but never in all his years of service had he believed it could be revived, let alone by a child. As Michael's voice rose in pitch, Carter's mind began calculating. The code that Michael was unknowingly unlocking could change the course of history, and not for the better. For years, Carter had been hunting down every lead, every whisper of the language, hoping to find a key that would unlock the secrets of a hidden network of power. But he hadn't expected to find it like this, by chance, in the back of a cafe, with a boy who had no idea what he was dealing with. His fingers tapped on the arm of his chair as he considered his next move. This boy was no longer just a child. He was a key, and Carter was determined to be the one to unlock the door. Dr. Cooper's voice broke through Carter's thoughts. "Michael, can you tell me where you learned this?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and concern. Michael looked up, his brow furrowing once more as if trying to make sense of the words that had just left his mouth. "I don't know," he said softly, his voice carrying an odd weight. I think it's always been inside me. Like, I've heard it before." His words sent a chill through Dr. Cooper. The boy wasn't just translating, he was channeling something ancient, something with power that neither of them understood. Admiral Carter stood up slowly from his corner, moving towards Dr. Cooper with a deliberate calmness that belied the urgency building in him. As he approached, he slipped a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table in front of Dr. Cooper. His voice was low, controlled, yet there was an underlying intensity that couldn't be ignored. "Dr. Cooper," he began, his eyes briefly flicking to Michael, "I've been listening to what you've been discussing with the boy. What he's speaking is more than just a rare dialect. It's a lost language, a code, if you will, with implications far beyond anything you've studied." Dr. Cooper looked up, startled by the man's sudden proximity and the oddness of his words. "Who are you?" he asked, his academic instincts kicking in. Carter smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Admiral Stephen Butera," he said simply, "and I've been tracking this language for years. What the boy is unlocking, it's not just history, it's a tool. A weapon." Dr. Cooper blinked, processing the words. His initial shock was quickly replaced by suspicion. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in his mind. Carter's smile faded, and he leaned in just slightly. "What I'm suggesting, Dr. Cooper, is that this boy has a talent that could change the course of global power. And I need to know just how deep this goes." The words sent a wave of realization crashing over Dr. Cooper. He was no longer just an academic observer. He was a participant in something much larger, something dangerous. His mind began racing. Was this the break he'd been waiting for? The discovery of a lifetime? Or was this the beginning of a much darker journey, one that could destroy everything he had worked for? He glanced at Michael, who was still softly muttering the strange passage, completely unaware of the stakes at play. Dr. Cooper's heart sank as he realized the answer to his question. Michael wasn't just a talented child. He was the key to a mystery that could unravel the world. Carter watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. He could see Dr. Cooper's hesitation, the man's inner struggle as he weighed the cost of getting involved in something so monumental. But Carter had no intention of leaving anything to chance. "We're not the only ones who know about this," he said quietly, his gaze hardening. "There are others who would kill for this boy's ability. The question, Dr. Cooper, is whether you'll help us protect him or become one of them." Dr. Cooper's thoughts raced, but there was no denying the pull of the situation. His own obsession with languages, the thrill of solving puzzles, was one thing. But now the stakes were something far greater than he had ever imagined. He was no longer just a scholar. He was part of a game, one with life and death consequences. Michael, still unaware of the adult's conversation, suddenly looked up, his eyes locking with Dr. Cooper's. "What's going to happen?" he asked softly, his voice carrying an innocent but desperate edge. The question hung in the air, a challenge that neither man could ignore. Admiral Carter glanced at Michael, his expression softening, if only for a moment. "What happens next, young man," he said, his voice cold but surprisingly gentle, "depends on how much you understand about the language you're speaking." Then, turning back to Dr. Cooper, he added, "and on whether you're willing to help me unlock its true potential." Dr. Cooper swallowed, his mind spinning. I'll help," he said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. But as he spoke, he couldn't help but wonder if it was already too late to turn back. The game had begun. Dr. Cooper couldn't shake the images from the cafe. Michael's flawless translation, the energy that had swept through the room, and Admiral Carter's cryptic words haunted him as he sat alone in his office, late into the evening. His fingers hovered over his keyboard, the screen in front of him filled with ancient texts that he had studied for years. But now his focus wasn't on the texts he knew, it was on the strange language Michael had spoken. What had started as a simple linguistic curiosity had spiraled into something far darker. He began researching the language in earnest, pulling up references from obscure corners of the academic world. The more he searched, the more he found fragments of code, encrypted military documents, and coded language that traced back to the Cold War. The connections were staggering. This wasn't just any forgotten dialect, it was linked to covert operations that had been erased from history, hidden from public knowledge. The language Michael had translated was far more than a relic of the past. It was a tool, one that could potentially unlock secrets of global power, espionage, and influence that no one had access to for decades. As Dr. Cooper dove deeper, the implications grew darker. He came across declassified military reports referencing a linguistic cipher used in top-secret operations. These documents detailed covert missions that had involved high-level intelligence agencies, all of which relied on the very language Michael had spoken. It was more than just an academic puzzle, it was a dangerous weapon. And as Dr. Cooper continued to connect the dots, a chilling realization took root in his mind. Michael wasn't just a boy with a unique talent. He was the key to a locked door that, if opened, could shift the balance of power on a global scale. Meanwhile, Admiral Carter's involvement loomed large in the background. Dr. Cooper had started to understand the gravity of the man's interest in Michael's translations. Carter wasn't just a curious academic, he was a man with a military background, one who understood exactly what the language could do. His quiet demeanor hid a sharp mind that had already made the connections Dr. Cooper was still unraveling. Carter was no longer just observing. He was actively hunting down the boy, trying to seize control of the secrets Michael was unknowingly unlocking. The more Dr. Cooper uncovered, the more he realized that his role in this wasn't as simple as he had imagined. The language Michael had spoken was directly tied to a classified operation that could have devastating consequences. But as Dr. Cooper sat with his findings, a new opportunity presented itself. Late one night, he received an encrypted message from an anonymous source, a powerful organization with deep ties to governments and intelligence networks. The message was simple: help us decode the language's full potential, and we will make you part of a global network of scholars and power players. Dr. Cooper stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as his mind raced. This was the opportunity. He had spent his career searching for the chance to be at the forefront of an academic revolution, to decode a language that could change the world. But as he read the message again, the weight of the decision settled over him. Was this just the next logical step in his academic journey, or was he putting Michael in grave danger? The boy was unaware of the forces that were closing in on him, unaware of the immense power his ability held. The idea of helping an organization like the one that had contacted him seemed tempting, but it was fraught with moral peril. Dr. Cooper was torn between his ambition and his growing realization that helping these people could cost Michael more than just his childhood. A knock at the door broke Dr. Cooper's thoughts, and he quickly shut his laptop, the weight of the decision lingering. It was his assistant, bringing him a message from Admiral Carter. The message was brief but unmistakable: meet me at the usual location, and we'll discuss how we can move forward with the boy's education. Dr. Cooper's heart skipped a beat. Carter was no longer just interested in Michael's linguistic talent. He was making a direct play to control the boy's future. The implication was clear. Either Dr. Cooper would help Carter harness Michael's abilities for his own purposes, or he would risk losing everything. Dr. Cooper stood up, his mind spinning with the options laid before him. One path would lead him deeper into the world of covert operations, where the stakes were far higher than he had ever imagined. The other would lead him down a path of secrecy and uncertainty, where the truth of what was really happening would remain buried. Either way, he knew there was no going back. But what truly unsettled him wasn't the decision he had to make. It was the growing sense that Michael, despite his young age, understood more than he let on. The boy's calm demeanor, the way he had spoken the language with ease, almost as if it was second nature to him, suggested a deep connection to the past that couldn't be ignored. Was Michael a tool to be used, or a victim of forces far beyond his control? The question haunted Dr. Cooper as he prepared to meet Admiral Carter, knowing that the next steps in this dangerous game would be ones he couldn't undo. What would you do if you discovered that someone close to you was unknowingly holding the key to a secret that could change the world? Would you protect them, or would you use their power for your own gain? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. How far would you go to protect someone with an incredible, dangerous gift? Or, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories from this high-stakes adventure. Dr. Cooper arrived at the rendezvous point, a quiet, unassuming diner on the outskirts of town. He could already feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. He was about to meet Admiral Carter again, and this time, it wouldn't just be about academic curiosity. The message he'd received had been clear. The stakes had changed. As he entered the diner, his mind raced through the possible outcomes of the meeting. Carter had never been just a scholar, and the truth was becoming undeniable. There was a darker agenda at play, one that involved far more than Michael's linguistic talents. When Dr. Cooper took his seat, Admiral Carter was already waiting, his posture rigid and military, his eyes scanning the room with sharp attention. The usual charm was gone. In its place was something colder, more calculating. "Dr. Cooper," Carter said, his voice low but commanding. "Thank you for coming." Cooper nodded, but kept his thoughts guarded. He had spent the past few days researching everything he could find on Carter, and the more he uncovered, the more his suspicions grew. This was no ordinary academic pursuit. It was about control. Carter's interest in Michael had never been simply intellectual. It was a matter of power. "Let me be clear with you, Cooper," Carter continued, leaning forward slightly. "I'm not here for your research. I'm not even here to help you publish your findings. I'm here for one thing and one thing only: the boy." The words hung in the air like a threat, and for the first time, Dr. Cooper felt the weight of the situation hit him full force. Carter wasn't just interested in Michael's rare talent. He wanted the power that came with it. Cooper had suspected it, but now the reality was undeniable. The language Michael had spoken wasn't just a fascinating relic of history. It was a tool to regain control over global security. Carter's eyes narrowed as he spoke again, his voice colder than before. "That language Michael is speaking? It's tied to ancient military codes, codes that were hidden away for a reason. They were once used in covert operations during the Cold War, operations that could have turned the tide in wars that never happened." Dr. Cooper's stomach dropped as he processed the information. He had read fragments about this language, but he had no idea that it was tied to military intelligence of such magnitude. The thought of Michael, a child with no idea of the gravity of what he was doing, unlocking codes that could shift the balance of power, was terrifying. Carter wasn't a well-meaning scholar. He was a man with an agenda, one that could put Michael and everyone close to him in danger. "I've spent years hunting down every trace of this language," Carter continued, his voice steady but tinged with something darker. "And now, with Michael, we have the key. We need him to finish what was started, to decode the full extent of what's hidden in those words. If he can do that, we'll have control of international security, global defense systems, the kind of power that no one has wielded in decades." Dr. Cooper felt a chill crawl up his spine. The idea of using a child, Michael, of all people, as a pawn in this high-stakes game made him sick. But Carter's conviction was undeniable. The man had been planning this for far too long, and now that Michael was in the picture, everything was about to change. Dr. Cooper swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. He had spent his life unraveling the mysteries of ancient languages, uncovering secrets buried in texts long thought lost. But never had he imagined he would be in the position of aiding someone like Carter. I don't understand, Cooper stammered, though his mind was racing. You're telling me you want Michael to what? Decode military operations from the past? For what purpose? Carter's lips curled into a thin smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. For the future, Dr. Cooper. The language Michael speaks can bring the past into the present. It's not just words, it's power. It can unlock weapons, dismantle security systems, even control information on a global scale. All I need is Michael to finish what he started. The weight of Carter's words sank in, and Dr. Cooper felt a deep unease. His academic instincts were screaming at him to refuse, to protect Michael and walk away from this dangerous world. But the part of him that had always sought knowledge, the part that had longed to be on the cutting edge of discovery, found it hard to let go. This was the breakthrough of a lifetime, one that most scholars could only dream of. But as the gravity of Carter's intentions became clear, Dr. Cooper knew that helping him was no longer an option. Carter wasn't just interested in decoding languages, he was after something much darker. As the conversation continued, Dr. Cooper's mind drifted back to Michael, the boy who had unknowingly set all of this into motion. The more Michael translated, the more strange occurrences seemed to follow. It had started subtly, the way the temperature in the cafe dropped when Michael spoke, the soft hum of the lights flickering in rhythm with his words. But now it was becoming more pronounced. Michael was unknowingly tapping into something far beyond his understanding. Each translation seemed to stir the air around them, as if the words themselves were alive, reacting to something hidden beneath the surface. Dr. Cooper could no longer ignore the growing sense of danger surrounding Michael's gift. The first signs of something more sinister appeared just days after the cafe incident. Mysterious people began showing up at the cafe, watching Michael from afar. At first, Dr. Cooper thought they were just curious patrons, intrigued by the young boy's language skills. But it quickly became clear that they were more than that. They were watching Michael, tracking his every move. The unease Dr. Cooper had been feeling grew, and he found himself scanning the cafe for unfamiliar faces, wondering who was following them next. It wasn't just at the cafe. Strange occurrences began following Dr. Cooper home. His phone rang in the middle of the night with no one on the other end. His mail was tampered with, important documents that had never left his office found in odd places, as if someone was trying to send him a message. Even his own colleagues seemed distant, as if they were keeping secrets from him. Dr. Cooper had always been cautious, but now he was beginning to feel the weight of forces far beyond his control. Michael's growing ability to decode the language had triggered a ripple effect, one that was slowly but surely unraveling everything in its path. Dr. Cooper knew that time was running out. The more Michael translated, the more the world around them seemed to shift. His gift was no longer just a curiosity, it was a beacon, drawing attention from forces who wanted to control him. Admiral Carter had made it clear that he was willing to go to any lengths to unlock the full potential of Michael's abilities. But what Dr. Cooper hadn't realized, not fully, was that Carter wasn't the only one hunting Michael's gift. There were others, hidden in the shadows, who would stop at nothing to claim it for their own. As Dr. Cooper sat alone in his office, the weight of the decision pressing down on him, he realized that he had crossed a line. The research was no longer just about discovery, it was about survival. He had unwittingly become a part of something much darker, something that would change the world in ways he could never have imagined. And now, Michael was in the middle of it all, unwittingly holding the key to secrets that could either save or destroy them all. Dr. Cooper paced back and forth in his cramped apartment, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. He had never intended for things to escalate this far, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. Michael was in danger, and so was his family. The threat had become all too real. Admiral Carter's reach was long, his influence spreading through military and intelligence channels that Dr. Cooper could no longer ignore. He had made a promise to protect Michael, but now, that promise seemed to come at a price far greater than he could have imagined. After days of careful consideration, Dr. Cooper had come to a painful conclusion. Michael's family needed to leave the city, and they needed to do it immediately. He had tried to protect them within the walls of his academic world, but the forces pursuing them were too powerful, too relentless. Michael was no longer just a child with a rare gift. He had become a key player in a deadly game, and those who sought to control him would stop at nothing to get their hands on him. Dr. Cooper had done everything he could to shield them, but now he was forced to admit that his efforts were insufficient. The only way to keep Michael and his family safe was to get them out of the city before it was too late. He called Michael's mother, Sarah, with a sense of urgency that had him speaking more quickly than he intended. "Sarah, listen to me," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You need to pack up and leave the city right now. Take Michael, go somewhere safe. I'll help you, but you need to move fast. They're already watching you." Sarah was quiet on the other end of the line, no doubt trying to process the gravity of what he was saying. Dr. Cooper had spent so long immersed in academic pursuits that he had forgotten the harsh reality of what it meant to live under the shadow of power. Now, the stakes were far too high, and his conscience couldn't bear the thought of letting Michael and his family face this alone. The next few hours were a blur of frantic packing and hurried goodbyes. Sarah, Michael, and Dr. Cooper made arrangements for them to leave the city under the cover of night. Michael, ever the curious child, had no idea of the danger they were in. He packed his things with the same excitement as he always did when they went on trips, unaware that this wasn't just another weekend getaway. Dr. Cooper's heart ached as he watched the boy. He had been so innocent in all of this, and now he was caught in the crossfire of forces he could not begin to understand. Still, Dr. Cooper reassured himself. He had done what he could to protect them, and he would continue to do whatever it took to keep them safe. But even as the plans were set into motion, Dr. Cooper knew that the military's reach was far too extensive. It wouldn't be long before Admiral Carter, or those working on his behalf, would catch up to them. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much of a game they were playing, except the stakes weren't theoretical and the consequences weren't abstract. This was real, and it was dangerous. Dr. Cooper had always prided himself on being in control, but now, for the first time, he felt helpless. The forces pursuing them were far beyond anything he had encountered in his career. As Michael and his family began their escape, the tension in the air grew palpable. Dr. Cooper could feel eyes on them. He didn't know if they were being watched by government agents or private operatives, but he knew they were being followed. It started with a black car parked across the street from his apartment, the same car he'd seen twice earlier that week. And then, as Michael and his mother made their way toward the train station, Dr. Cooper spotted another figure, a tall man with a jacket pulled low, standing too still in the crowd. It was subtle at first, but it became clearer by the minute. They were being watched. No one had said a word, but the danger was now as real as the city streets they hurried to escape. They made their way to the airport, hoping to disappear into the crowd, but the moment they walked through the terminal doors, Dr. Cooper felt a rush of unease. The place was teeming with people, but there was something about the way they moved that felt wrong. The usual hustle and bustle of airport life had taken on a frenetic edge, people moving too quickly, too purposefully, their eyes darting around in a way that didn't match the casual atmosphere. Dr. Cooper scanned the crowd, his eyes darting between faces, looking for anyone who might be following them. And then, just as they were about to approach the gate, Dr. Cooper caught a glimpse of something, a familiar face among the crowd. A man in a black suit, sunglasses, and an earpiece, standing near the escalator, watching them with chilling intensity. "Sarah, we need to go." "Now," Dr. Cooper hissed under his breath, his heart pounding. Sarah's face paled as she saw the look in his eyes. The familiar calm of a mother protecting her child shifted into something more urgent, more desperate. Michael, blissfully unaware, tugged at her hand, asking why they were in such a hurry. Sarah squeezed his hand, trying to mask the fear in her voice. "We're going to get on the plane, sweetheart. Just a little faster now, okay?" The next few moments were a blur. Dr. Cooper ushered them past the check-in counter, past security, as the man in the black suit started moving in their direction. Michael, sensing the sudden tension in the air, looked up at Dr. Cooper with confusion. But the urgency in the adults' faces left no room for explanation. The distance between them and the man in the black suit seemed to close in seconds. Dr. Cooper's heart was in his throat, and he pushed forward with every ounce of strength he had, praying they'd make it to the gate before it was too late. A last-minute phone call from an unknown number confirmed what Dr. Cooper had feared. The military was closing in. The anonymous voice on the other end of the line spoke in a cold, dispassionate tone. "We know where you're going, Dr. Cooper. Don't think you can hide. We'll be there soon enough." The call ended abruptly, leaving nothing but the echo of impending danger in Dr. Cooper's ears. His pulse quickened as he turned to Sarah. "We have to get to the plane now. Don't look back, don't hesitate." But even as the family rushed toward their gate, Dr. Cooper knew the truth. This wasn't just a close call, it was the beginning of something far darker. They were no longer just running from Admiral Carter's influence. They were being hunted, and the shadows of those who sought to control Michael's gift were already closing in. What would you do if you were in Michael's shoes, unaware of the danger that was following you and your family? How would you react if you suddenly realized that you were the key to something so powerful yet so dangerous? Leave a comment with your thoughts. What would be your next move if you were in Dr. Cooper's position, trying to protect someone with such an incredible gift? And if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more twists and turns as Michael and his family's escape takes them to places they never expected. Dr. Cooper sat at his desk late that night, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the keyboard. The weight of the decision before him was suffocating, a question of loyalty and morality that threatened to tear him apart. The message had come through an encrypted channel, an offer he could neither ignore nor easily accept. The government, through an anonymous intermediary, had made it clear, helped them unlock the full extent of Michael's ability, and his career would be cemented. The resources, the power, the academic prestige, all of it was within his grasp. But the cost was too high. It wasn't just about ambition anymore, it was about Michael. He ran his hands over his face, the gravity of the choice pressing heavily on his conscience. He had always prided himself on his ability to discern the truth, to see through the fog of academia and uncover knowledge for the greater good. But now, the lines between right and wrong were blurring in ways he had never imagined. Michael wasn't just a subject of study. He was a person, a child with a gift that, if exploited, could change the world in ways no one could predict. Dr. Cooper's guilt began to gnaw at him, the realization settling in that his ambition might cost him more than he was willing to pay. Could he live with himself if he allowed Michael's powers to fall into the wrong hands? The phone rang, cutting through the silence of his office like a knife. Dr. Cooper hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and unmistakably familiar. "Admiral Carter." "Dr. Cooper, I trust you've received my offer," Carter said, his tone casual, but there was an underlying urgency that couldn't be ignored. "You know what's at stake here. Michael's potential is something that can't be left untapped. You've seen what he can do, what he will do. This isn't just about discovery. This is about control." Dr. Cooper clenched his jaw, the weight of Carter's words pressing down on him. He had known this was coming. Admiral Carter wasn't just interested in Michael's talents for academic curiosity. Carter was driven by power, the kind of power that came from unlocking the mysteries of the past and using them to control the future. It was a power that Michael unknowingly held in his hands. And now, Dr. Cooper was being asked to make a choice. Help Carter harness that power or risk losing everything, his career, his future, and the boy's safety. The question echoed in Dr. Cooper's mind, over and over again. Was he willing to betray Michael to protect his own interests? As the hours stretched on, he found himself slipping further into doubt. He had spent years studying languages, uncovering lost knowledge, but never before had he been faced with a choice like this. The academic world had always seemed like a world of pure pursuit, of knowledge, discovery, and truth. But now, the truth was something else entirely. It was a dangerous game, one where innocence was lost and the cost of ambition was measured in lives. Meanwhile, Admiral Carter was growing increasingly desperate. As Dr. Cooper wrestled with his conscience, Carter's resources were steadily closing in on Michael. Every lead, every hint of the boy's whereabouts was being tracked, monitored, and followed with ruthless efficiency. Carter knew that time was running out. The boy's abilities were something that couldn't be ignored, and the power he could unlock was something that couldn't be allowed to slip through Carter's fingers. He was already too far invested in this game to back out now. Carter's desperation became apparent as he pushed harder, using every tool at his disposal to track Michael and his family. Dr. Cooper had become a pawn in this dangerous game, and Carter knew it. The power Michael possessed was too valuable for anyone to stand in Carter's way. There were no boundaries when it came to securing that kind of power. Dr. Cooper was no longer just a scholar, he was a key player, one that Carter intended to keep under control. As the days passed, Dr. Cooper's sense of guilt only deepened. He began to see the boy's face in his mind every time he sat down to make a decision. Michael, who had no understanding of the dangerous forces surrounding him. Michael, who was just a child, caught in the crossfire of a battle he couldn't even comprehend. The boy's innocence only made the situation worse. Dr. Cooper knew that if he chose the government's offer, he would be sealing Michael's fate, using him as a pawn in a game of power that had far-reaching consequences. Could he really live with that choice? Was his career worth sacrificing a child's future? As the tension mounted, Dr. Cooper knew the time for indecision was over. Admiral Carter's words haunted him, and he could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a vice. There was no going back now. He had to act, and the consequences of that action would shape the rest of his life. The moment of betrayal was fast approaching, and Dr. Cooper couldn't escape the reality that he had become entangled in something far greater than himself. The pursuit of knowledge had always been his passion, but now it seemed like the very thing that would cost him his soul. Dr. Cooper sat alone in his office, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. The room was dark except for the soft glow of his desk lamp, illuminating piles of research notes, ancient texts, and military documents that had become all too familiar. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle now falling into place with horrifying clarity. He had become an unwilling participant in something far greater than he had ever imagined. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how deeply entangled he had become in Admiral Carter's plans and how little control he had left. The message had come earlier that day, a coded email from Admiral Carter himself. The words were clear: "We have no more time, Dr. Cooper. Make your choice. If you want to keep your career, you'll help me unlock Michael's abilities. If you refuse, everything you've worked for will be taken from you. The decision is yours." The ultimatum left no room for ambiguity. Carter had always been patient, but now, the tone of the message was a warning. The military's reach was vast, and Carter's methods were ruthless. There was no turning back from this. Dr. Cooper knew it in his bones. The only choice left was whether to betray Michael completely or stand against the forces closing in on them. Dr. Cooper's hand hovered over the keyboard, his fingers trembling. He could already hear the voice of Michael's mother, Sarah, in his mind, the trust she had placed in him. He had promised her that he would protect Michael, but now, protecting the boy seemed like an impossible task. The more he learned about the power Michael was unlocking, the more he realized that helping Carter meant selling the boy's soul and his own. But without any allies, without any way to stand against Carter's overwhelming influence, what choice did he have? Michael wasn't just a child anymore. He was the key to a global power struggle, and Dr. Cooper had played a pivotal role in setting this dangerous game into motion. As if on cue, the phone rang. Dr. Cooper's heart skipped a beat when he saw the caller ID. It was Admiral Carter. With a deep breath, Dr. Cooper picked up the phone. Dr. Cooper, Carter's voice was as cold and controlled as always, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. "I trust you've thought about my offer. You've made your decision, haven't you?" The pressure in Carter's voice was palpable. Dr. Cooper clenched his jaw, trying to steady himself. "I understand the consequences of what you're asking, Carter," he said, his voice hoarse. But you need to understand, Michael isn't a tool. He's a child. You're asking me to manipulate him into something he doesn't understand." A long silence followed. Then Carter's voice, softer but more insistent, came through the line. "Dr. Cooper, you and I both know what Michael is capable of. You can't protect him forever. I've given you a choice, you make the decision. You know what I'll do if you don't cooperate. I'm not asking for your help anymore. I'm telling you that you'll help me, or I will force your hand. You have no more time." The finality in Carter's voice hit Dr. Cooper harder than he expected. This wasn't an academic pursuit anymore. It was a game of power and survival. Carter wasn't just a threat to Michael anymore. He was a threat to everything Dr. Cooper had built. The message was clear. If Dr. Cooper didn't comply, if he didn't help Carter unlock the full extent of Michael's abilities, Carter would destroy him. It wasn't just about Michael anymore. It was about the cost of standing in the way of someone with Carter's resources and determination. Dr. Cooper had become an unwilling pawn in a high-stakes game, and he could already feel the walls closing in. As Dr. Cooper hung up the phone, he knew what had to be done. But it felt like the ultimate betrayal. He was no longer just protecting a child, he was helping the very forces that would exploit Michael's powers for their own gain. The guilt threatened to crush him, but as he stared at the phone, he realized that his time for hesitation had run out. Michael's family had to get away now. Dr. Cooper moved quickly, contacting Sarah. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable when she answered. "Sarah, listen to me. You need to leave the city immediately. I'll help you get to a safe place, somewhere hidden. Carter is closing in. You don't have much time." He could hear the confusion in Sarah's voice. "What do you mean? What's going on, Dr. Cooper? You promised you'd protect Michael. I trusted you." Her words cut through him like a knife, but he knew this was the only way. The longer Michael stayed in the open, the greater the risk. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I never wanted this. But I'm trying to help you now. I'll get you both out. But you need to move fast. I'll meet you soon." Minutes later, Dr. Cooper arranged a rendezvous point. They would leave the city under the cover of darkness, blending in with the other travelers and hoping they could disappear before anyone noticed. But Dr. Cooper knew it was a temporary solution. Carter's network was vast, and the moment they left the city, they would be on the radar. The only question now was how long they could stay ahead of him. The stakes had never been higher, and Dr. Cooper was becoming more certain with each passing second that there was no way out without further compromising himself. In the meantime, Michael's abilities continued to grow. The boy was translating more passages with ease, his words flowing effortlessly as he unlocked the ancient codes hidden in the language. But as he spoke, something changed in the air. The power he was accessing seemed to resonate through the room, pulsing with an energy that Dr. Cooper could almost feel in his bones. It wasn't just a linguistic ability, it was something deeper, something that reached into the very fabric of reality. With each new translation, Michael seemed to unlock more than just words. He was unraveling something far more dangerous. Dr. Cooper could see it in Michael's eyes, and understanding was beginning to form, one that was far beyond his years. Michael wasn't just reciting phrases anymore. He was tapping into something ancient, something powerful. He could sense the weight of the language now, the way the words seemed to shimmer in the air before they left his mouth. But with that understanding came the realization of how dangerous it was. Michael wasn't just decoding a forgotten language. He was wielding power that could alter the course of history. The more Michael unlocked, the more the world seemed to change around them. The deeper he dove into the language, the more he realized how much danger he was in. He could feel the weight of the world pressing on him, the power that he was tapping into becoming more and more difficult to control. And yet, despite all the uncertainty, Michael continued to speak, his young voice resonating with a strength that belied his age. The transformation was happening faster than Dr. Cooper had anticipated. Michael was no longer just a boy. He was becoming something much more. But with that transformation came a cost. And Dr. Cooper wasn't sure if Michael would be able to walk away from it. The cold, sterile walls of the military installation loomed like a fortress, its heavy steel doors shutting behind them with a loud clang. Michael's footsteps echoed in the vast, dimly lit hallway as Dr. Cooper and Sarah hurried beside him, their faces set with determination. It was the kind of place where secrets were kept and history was buried deep beneath layers of security. This was not just any facility, it was the heart of Admiral Carter's operation, the place where everything would come to a head. The air inside felt thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. Michael had been brought here under duress, forced into a situation that he didn't understand. His mind was still reeling from the events of the last few days, the constant danger, the realization that his gift was no longer just an oddity, it was a weapon. Dr. Cooper had tried to prepare him for what lay ahead, but nothing could have truly prepared Michael for the weight of the truth. They had made it this far, but the deeper they ventured into the facility, the more Michael could feel the oppressive power of Carter's influence closing in. He knew they were being watched, he could almost feel the eyes of unseen soldiers tracking their every move. But it wasn't just the military's presence that unsettled him, it was what he was about to uncover about his own abilities. Admiral Carter was waiting for them in a large control room at the heart of the installation. The walls were lined with monitors, each displaying sensitive data and top-secret information, all under the tightest security. Carter stood at the center, his expression unreadable as he studied the massive screen before him. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions brewing inside Michael. Dr. Cooper, too, seemed uneasy, his posture rigid, but he didn't speak. The tension was palpable, and Michael could feel his heart racing as he took in the sight of the room. This was the place where it would all come to an end. The boy who had unknowingly unlocked secrets now stood at the very threshold of those secrets being used for unimaginable power. Carter's eyes flicked toward Michael, and for the first time, the Admiral's cool composure cracked ever so slightly. "Michael," he said, his voice laced with both admiration and cold calculation, "you've done well to come this far. What you've unlocked already is impressive, but now we can do something much more meaningful. Your abilities can bring us the control we've been looking for." Michael's stomach twisted, a cold shiver running down his spine. He had never wanted any of this. He hadn't asked for the ability to understand languages long thought lost, much less to be thrust into a battle for global power. But as he stood there, feeling the weight of the situation pressing in on him, he realized that he was no longer just an innocent bystander in this game. His gift was now a battleground. Dr. Cooper stepped forward, his voice low and tense. "This isn't what we agreed upon, Carter. You promised this wouldn't go this far." Carter's lips curled into a thin smile, his eyes cold and calculating. "Promises are for those who believe they have a choice," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You've seen the potential Michael has. You've felt the power in those words he speaks. Now, it's time to unlock the rest of it. And you, Dr. Cooper, will help us do that." Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he listened. It was clear that Carter wasn't interested in just studying the language anymore, he wanted to use it. And that wasn't something Michael could allow. As Michael stood there, his mind began to race. He had felt the power in the words before, the strange, almost hypnotic pull that came with speaking the ancient language. But he hadn't fully understood what it meant. He had always thought that language was just a way to communicate, a tool for understanding others. But as he looked around at the screens, at the vast amounts of information and military secrets displayed before him, something clicked inside his mind. This wasn't just about translating words, it was about controlling them. The language Michael had unlocked could influence events, could change outcomes, could bend reality itself. Without thinking, Michael stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with an unfamiliar authority. "You're wrong, Carter," he said, his words cutting through the room like a blade. "This isn't about control. It's about understanding. The language doesn't give power, it gives knowledge. And knowledge is not something to be wielded. It's something to be shared." The words surprised even him, but as he spoke, Michael felt a surge of energy, an undeniable connection to something deeper than himself. He was no longer just translating words, he was shaping the very fabric of reality with them. Carter's face darkened, his eyes narrowing as he studied Michael. "You don't understand what you're saying," he growled, stepping closer. "You think this is about knowledge? This is about power. The world is in chaos, Michael. People are dying, and the language you've unlocked can fix that. We can use it to restore order, to bring about a new world order." Michael's gut twisted in response, but his resolve hardened. This wasn't just about words, it was about choice. He had a choice, and for the first time, Michael realized that he could use the language for something other than destruction. He could use it to stop Carter, to prevent him from using it as a tool for his own gain. As the two stared at each other, the room seemed to shift around them. The monitors flickered, the lights dimmed, and the air grew thick with the weight of Michael's growing power. He could feel it building within him, the energy of the ancient language stirring to life in the back of his mind. The words he spoke weren't just phrases, they were incantations, commands that could reshape the world around him. As he spoke, Michael could see the shift happening before his eyes. The air seemed to bend, the walls pulsating with energy, and for a brief moment, Michael saw the full extent of what the language could do. It could influence events, change outcomes, and it was all within his grasp. With a sudden surge of focus, Michael spoke again, his voice low and steady. "I won't let you use it, Carter," he said. "The world isn't something that can be controlled. It's something we must learn to coexist with. If you use the language as a weapon, you'll destroy everything." The room seemed to tremble as his words echoed through it, the power of the language resonating with every syllable. Carter took a step back, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and disbelief. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat, but Michael's confidence had already begun to shift the power dynamic in the room. For a moment, there was silence. Carter stood there, his fists clenched, clearly struggling to maintain control. But Michael, now fully aware of the power he wielded, felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. He wasn't just decoding a language anymore, he was changing the course of history. And as the realization hit him, Michael knew that his gift was not just a tool to be used, it was a responsibility, a force for good or evil depending on how it was wielded. The choice was his. If you had the power to change the course of history with just a few words, how would you use it? Would you fight to protect the world, or would you let others manipulate it for their own gain? What do you think Michael will do next? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, subscribe to follow Michael's journey as he faces the ultimate test of his power. The tension in the control room was unbearable, every second stretching into eternity. Michael stood at the center of the room, his hands shaking as he glanced between Dr. Cooper and the numerous monitors that lined the walls. The military installation was buzzing with activity, but all of it seemed distant to him now. All that mattered was the final confrontation that had been building for days, weeks, perhaps. The power to stop Admiral Carter's plans was in Michael's hands, but so was the potential to destroy everything. Michael had learned much about his abilities in the last few hours, more than he ever wanted to know. The ancient language he spoke was no longer a puzzle or a mere tool for communication. It was a weapon, a force that could change the world. But as he had discovered, the language wasn't just about decoding information. It was about bending reality itself, reshaping events, and manipulating the very fabric of history. The responsibility felt crushing. Each word Michael spoke could alter the course of the future, and now he had to stop Carter from using that power to control it all. Dr. Cooper stood beside him, his face pale but resolute. "Michael," he said, his voice strained but urgent, "you can do this. You have to." The older man had been silent for most of the confrontation, his mind still reeling from the choices he had made, but now, as Michael prepared to act, there was no hesitation in his voice. Carter's influence had spread throughout the facility, with military personnel scurrying to implement his plan of using the language as a weapon of mass control. The stakes had never been higher, and Dr. Cooper knew that failure meant more than just losing their lives, it meant losing the future itself. Michael swallowed hard, nodding as he focused on the central screen in front of him. The military operation was well underway. Carter had initiated the first stages of his global power shift, and within moments, the world's most sensitive defense systems would be compromised. All it would take was a few words, a few commands, and the security of entire nations would be at the mercy of whoever controlled the language. But Michael knew now that the language wasn't just a command, it was a balance, a system of interlocking forces. To change one thing could lead to catastrophic consequences. He could feel the danger that came with every syllable, the power to shape the future, and the price he would pay to do so. Admiral Carter's voice cut through the room, breaking the silence with chilling clarity. "You're out of time, Michael," he said, stepping forward, his face twisted in a mix of frustration and anger. "You have no idea what you're doing. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. You think you can stop this?" Carter's hand rested on the console beside him, his fingers tapping impatiently as he looked Michael up and down. "You don't understand the weight of what you hold. All this power, and you think you can walk away from it? I'll make sure you never get the chance to make that mistake." Michael's heart raced, his breath shallow. He had come so far, and yet now, in the face of Carter's defiance, the weight of the decision felt heavier than ever. But something inside him shifted, a resolve forming that had been growing since he first stepped into this world of espionage and power. He wasn't just translating words anymore, he was rewriting the rules of engagement. "I won't let you use it," Michael said, his voice strong despite the fear that gripped him. "This language isn't a weapon. It's meant to be understood, not controlled." Carter smirked, his hands clasped in front of him. "You think you're the one in control here, Michael? You've only scratched the surface. You're nothing but a tool, just like Dr. Cooper. I gave you the chance to be something more. But now, you'll help me finish what we started. You'll do what I say, or you'll destroy everything." The air in the room shifted once more, and Michael felt a strange pressure building inside him. It wasn't just the power of the language, it was the responsibility that came with it. He was no longer just a boy reciting words. He was the keeper of something far greater, something that had the potential to break or heal the world. And he knew, without a doubt, that if he didn't act now, Carter would use it for his own gain, reshaping the world into something unrecognizable. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm not going to let you use me," he said, his words rippling with power as they filled the room. "You've been manipulating people for too long, Carter. The world doesn't need another tyrant. It needs understanding." As he spoke, the language surged within him, the words flowing out in an ancient rhythm that resonated with the very walls of the facility. The monitors flickered, and the machinery hummed in response to the language, an unspoken connection between Michael and the system. But it wasn't just a mechanical reaction, it was a living, breathing force, as though Michael had tapped into something deeper, something that went beyond technology. Carter's face contorted in disbelief. "You fool," he spat, stepping forward with fury in his eyes. "You can't stop this. The world will be mine." He lunged forward, reaching for the console, his movements swift and desperate. But as his fingers brushed the buttons, the room seemed to freeze. The air thickened, and the lights flickered, a final warning to Carter that the power he sought had slipped beyond his grasp. Michael's voice rang out again, this time carrying a force that shook the very foundation of the installation. "Enough," he commanded, his words pulling the strings of the reality around them. Carter staggered back, a look of horror crossing his face as he felt the language slip through his grasp, leaving him powerless. The systems that Carter had so carefully manipulated began to unravel, the military operations he had set in motion grinding to a halt as the very language he had hoped to control rebelled against him. The entire facility seemed to tremble as the language spread through the network, dismantling Carter's plans piece by piece. The military systems that had been compromised slowly started to reset, each command being reversed, the balance of power shifting back into place. Michael's growing understanding of the language had allowed him to not only interpret it, but to control its effects, to direct its power in ways that Carter had never anticipated. Admiral Carter stood there, stunned, as Michael's words dissolved the carefully laid plans he had spent so long orchestrating. "No!" Carter shouted, his voice breaking as he lunged at Michael, desperation seeping into his tone. But Michael stepped back, his gaze unwavering, and with a final command, the systems around them fell silent, locking Carter out of the control room's core. Carter's eyes narrowed with pure rage. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "You'll regret this, Michael. You've only delayed the inevitable." But Michael stood his ground, his eyes hardening with resolve. "The inevitable is something we choose, Carter. And I'm choosing something different." As Carter turned and stormed out, the weight of the battle lifted from Michael's shoulders. The installation was now secure, and Carter's influence had been undone. But Michael knew this wasn't the end. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But for now, he had taken control, and for the first time, he felt the true power of the language, the power to change the world. The final moments at the military installation had been a blur of noise, chaos, and fleeting moments of clarity. Michael, Dr. Cooper, and Sarah had barely managed to escape the clutches of Admiral Carter's operation, fleeing through a maze of corridors as alarms blared behind them. The facility, once a symbol of control, had been rendered impotent in the wake of Michael's power, but that didn't stop the military from closing in. With every step they took, Michael could feel the weight of their pursuit, the threat hanging over them like a storm cloud waiting to burst. As they made their way to the exit, the realization hit Michael like a wave: his life would never be the same again. The outside world had never felt so vast and intimidating. They had reached a safe house, one of Dr. Cooper's old colleagues who owed him a favor, but the sanctuary it provided was only temporary. The shadows of the past, the ones that had been chasing them since Michael first unlocked the language, were still there, lurking just beyond the horizon. As Dr. Cooper locked the door behind them and closed the blinds, Michael could hear the distant hum of the city, a city that had once felt familiar, but now seemed like a world away. They were no longer just a family living their lives. They were fugitives, living in hiding, with the entire world after them. Michael looked at his mother, her face drawn with worry, her eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't fully understand. She had always been his protector, the one who kept him safe from the world's dangers, but now, even she seemed helpless in the face of the forces that were closing in on them. "What happens now, Mom?" he asked softly, his voice filled with the fear that had been building inside him for days. Sarah smiled weakly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We survive, Michael. That's what happens now." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't allow the tears to fall. She couldn't. Not yet. Dr. Cooper sat at the small table in the corner of the room, staring at the stack of papers in front of him. His hands were trembling, his mind still reeling from everything that had transpired. He had never thought of himself as a man of action. His world had always been one of books, research, and quiet study. But now, the world had forced him into a role he wasn't prepared for. He had helped Michael, yes, but at what cost? He had betrayed the very values he had spent his life championing, all in the name of knowledge. And now, with Carter's forces still hunting them, Dr. Cooper realized just how little he knew about what the future would hold. As Michael sat next to Dr. Cooper, he could sense the older man's turmoil. "Dr. Cooper, what if we can't keep running? What if Carter finds us?" Michael's voice trembled slightly, betraying the fear he tried so hard to suppress. Dr. Cooper looked up, his eyes dark with the weight of the world. "Michael," he said softly, "the world is changing because of you. You've done something no one thought was possible. But there are people who want to control that power, people who will stop at nothing to use it for their own gain. And those people will come for you again." It was a bitter truth, one that Michael had known deep down but had never fully accepted. They couldn't keep running forever. The world they had known, their quiet life in the suburbs, was gone. And as long as Michael's ability remained, it would make him a target. The language he had unlocked was too powerful, too dangerous to be left alone. They had no choice but to hide, to disappear, and to pray that they could stay one step ahead of those who would use Michael as a tool for control. Later that night, as the weight of everything settled in, Michael sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. He could hear his mother's soft breathing as she slept, exhausted from the day's events. Dr. Cooper had retreated to another room to make a few calls, but Michael didn't want to talk to anyone right now. The reality of what had happened was starting to hit him, the magnitude of the power he held and the dangers it brought. He had thought that his ability to speak the ancient language was a gift, something unique and special. But now it felt more like a curse, a burden he wasn't sure he was ready to carry. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty that gnawed at him, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he had to keep going. He had no idea how long they would remain hidden, how long they could stay ahead of Carter's reach, but he couldn't let his gift be used for the wrong purposes. He had seen too much, the way the language had altered reality, had shifted the balance of power in ways that should never have been allowed. The world couldn't be allowed to use his power to manipulate history. The fight wasn't over, it had only just begun. As the hours stretched on and the quiet of the night settled in, Michael finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. His life had changed forever. There was no going back to the way things had been before. But he had something now, something no one could take from him. The language wasn't just about controlling events or rewriting history. It was about understanding the world, about seeing beyond what was immediately in front of him. And if there was one thing Michael knew for certain, it was that understanding was the key to surviving whatever came next. The family's escape wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. The world would never forget Michael, the boy who could speak the past, but whether they would ever truly be safe was another question entirely. With each passing day, the power of his gift would continue to grow, and so would the dangers that surrounded them. But for now, they had made it this far. They had survived. And as Michael lay down to sleep, he vowed to do whatever it took to protect his family, to keep them safe from the shadows that were still hunting them. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.